So the 2025 NFL draft is a couple months away, but we're at the point where a lot of information's coming out with some of these different prospects. We're starting to get guys ranked higher, guys that are kind of falling a little bit based off of preseason projections. We've got a lot of tape at this point as well. And today we're going to talk about a guy that is coming out of LSU. This is a guy that a lot of people have ranked very, very, very high. And I'm going to talk to you guys about why Will Campbell of LSU is not actually going to play tackle in the NFL, and why I think a lot of people are actually overvaluing Will Campbell at this point. Plus, I'm going to give you guys 3 offensive tackles right now that some NFL scouts actually have a lot higher than where they're kind of being ranked based off the consensus. There's 3 guys that I think all have first round potential. Now, I don't think they're going to go in the first round. One of these 3 guys may. The other 2 will probably be second round picks. We saw guys like Patrick Paul last year end up going a lot higher than what people had him projected. And one of the things that happens with the draft is, a lot of people look at the actual position a guy plays and they just make the assumption that this guy will play the same position in the NFL. But NFL teams don't value these guys the way people in the draft community do. And one of the big reasons why is because the NFL has actual verified measurable data. And what that means is, Will Campbell right now has very, very, very short arms. And if you watch his tape, you can kind of see that on tape at times, right? Guys are sometimes outreaching him. Guys are out leveraging him. They're able to maybe push him to the side, and a part of that is because he's not very, very long. He is 6'5" and 6'10", so height-wise, it's not an issue. But from an arm perspective, 32 and 7/8 of an inch arms, that's not long enough, and NFL teams are not going to value him as a tackle. Right? I've spoken to 3 different scouts up to this point, specifically about Will Campbell, and none of them have him as an actual tackle in the NFL. Now, can some team out there say, hey, this is a tackle and we're going to take him in the first round? Absolutely. We saw Peter Skronsky kind of go through this, where the Titans took this guy and said, we're going to see if he'll be a tackle, but pretty much he ended up playing guard right away. We saw Jordan Morgan just this past year coming out of Arizona. He went through that same cycle, right? The Packers needed a tackle. Are they going to go with Morgan, or is he going to end up playing guard? And up to this point, he's mostly played guard. We do have the occasional guys like Rashawn Slater who come out, guard, tackle, phenomenal tape, and he actually works out as a tackle, but that is very, very rare. Most of those guys end up going to guard, some end up even going to center, as we saw with Graham Barton this past season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Will Campbell right now is not being valued as an offensive tackle, and I think with that, a lot of people have him ranked too high at this point. Will Campbell on tape does look really good, right? And I'll start right there. We'll talk about some of what he does do before we get into some more of the cons that I see on tape. So Will Campbell moves really, really well. He's 6'5" and 6/10 of an inch. Moves really well. He's quick, has good footwork, can process really, really, really well. And you see that right away on tape. And Will Campbell's played some really good defensive linemen already so far, right? He played South Carolina. They have 2 NFL caliber players, although one's a freshman. He played Texas A&M just this past week, and Nick Scorton's getting a lot of hype as a top 10 pick potentially. And LSU, generally speaking, is going to play some of the best schools, right? You're in the SEC. You're going to play NFL caliber players pretty much every single week. And Will Campbell's pretty much held his own against most of those guys, but he has had struggling reps, right? So against Texas A&M just this past week, Cassius Howe, who transferred from Bowling Green to Texas A&M, had a really, really good game against Will Campbell, and Campbell struggled, right? Howe has like that combination of pass rush tools, but he's also quick. There were plays where this guy just straight up made Campbell miss. There were moves where this guy spun to the inside, and Campbell just wasn't able to mirror it. Will Campbell does have a lot of really, really good traits, but I do think that a lot of those traits translate him into being a guard. I would even make the argument Will Campbell might be the best overall offensive lineman if you look at the class that's kind of coming out. This offensive line class has a lot of guards. They have a lot of interior guys. I think they have tackles that will end up struggling at tackle. There's some guys that I think will end up being able to play tackle, but, offensive tackle is a hard position, right? However you look at it, it's a very, very hard position. And with Will Campbell, the fact that he does struggle with power at times, he does get outreached at times, I think those things right there are going to translate him not having success at the next level. The movement translates well to guard. Being a technician, right? Very good technique. That translates well to guard. And I think Will Campbell is going to end up becoming one of the top 10 guards in the NFL, but I just don't see him being valued as an offensive tackle. In fact, I think we're going to see like 3 or 4 offensive linemen go before Campbell. Right? Teams that actually need tackles are going to take tackles. And another thing to note is, Will Campbell's technically a junior. He could easily go back to college. And we have a lot of these guys that are juniors that could technically go back to college, including this first guy I want to kind of talk about that is at the moment getting first round hype. That's going to be Josh Conerly out of Oregon. One of the things with Will Campbell is we have his actual verified data. With Josh Conerly, we do not, right? So we don't have his actual data right now. He's estimated at 6'4", but Conerly's tape's really, really, really impressive. And he's one of the 3 guys that I think that has, potentially first round upside. But I think he'll end up going top 64 if he were to come out this year. But I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up going in the first round. And a big part of that is because the guy has, great footwork. He has good power. He knows how to move. And more than that, the guy had a phenomenal game just this past week against Michigan. I think for me, one of the things I wanted to see from Conerly was how does he handle top tier competition? And Oregon's played some good teams right up to this point. But Michigan has pretty much 3 or 4 guys on that defensive line that are in the NFL. And Conerly had a really, really good game. Play in, play out, he was able to hold his own against some of the guys that they have over there in Michigan. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart. This guy had a really good game against all of those guys. And generally speaking, I'd say he won like 98% of his reps. The losing reps, I think, came kind of early on. But I think he adjusted well over the course of the game, and he held his own against a really good defensive line. To me, one of the things I like with Josh Conerly that I don't see with Will Campbell is Josh Conerly doesn't struggle with power. And I think when you get into the NFL, there's a rare combination that you see with NFL defensive ends. Some guys are super powerful, and then you get other guys that are super quick, right? You get the Michael Parsons out there. But you also get guys that are kind of in between and kind of all over the place. So Will Campbell does a good job against speed, but sometimes he does struggle against power, specifically in space, right? And keep in mind, when you're a tackle, you're playing in space. When you're a guard, you're not playing in as much space because you have a center to your right or left, and you have a tackle to the outside of you, essentially. Conerly does a good job against both power and against speed, right? If there's one thing he struggles with right now, I think it's just being consistent with his technique. And I think it is something that's gotten a lot better. Plus, Oregon has a great offensive line coach, right? So it's one of those things where I think when you consider the factors that we've seen Oregon offensive linemen over the past couple of years translate really, really well into the NFL, I think Josh Conerly is going to kind of fit in that same mold. Now, keep in mind, this guy is a junior, so he does not have to come out this year. And some people do think that if Conerly ends up coming out, he could be the first tackle taken. Kelvin Banks is kind of right there as well, but some people do think Conerly could be the first. Now, if he waits one more year and he puts out one more tape of just being, a dominant player like we've kind of seen him up to this point, some people think he'll be the first tackle for sure taken in next year's class. These next 2 years of offensive line play, specifically the tackle position, is not great, right? And tackles have been told over the past couple of years to stay in college, right? It'll allow you to develop your skills to kind of get ready. And the next 2 guys we're going to talk about, I think both of them are basically in year 5 in college, so you kind of see why, they kind of stuck around, but I think it's paid off for both of these guys. We'll talk about them in a second. But just to wrap up Conerly, the guy's strong. I think he does a really good at the point of attack. He does a great job at the point of attack, but he uses his hands really well. And you see that power and pop when he puts his hands on guys, right? You see him absolutely get physical with guys. The punch, the timing of the hands. He doesn't have a lean. And that's another thing with Will Campbell that you do see sometimes is because he's not very strong, you do sometimes see him lean into guys, right? He's not long, so you'll see him lean a little bit. Conerly has no lean, and I think that's going to translate really well into the NFL. If I'm a betting man, if I'm projecting, although I do think Will Campbell might go ahead of Josh Conerly, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't. Right? If the odds are for Will Campbell, 80% towards Will Campbell, I would take the other side of it. I think Conerly is going to end up being one of the top 2 tackles. There's another guy that has a ton of potential. This guy kind of reminds me a little bit of Patrick Paul because both guys are so tall and so long and so lengthy. And they're both kind of raw. And I shouldn't even use the word raw, but Nebraska's right tackle, Bryce Benhart, a 5th-year player, just played against Ohio State. That was the game that I was kind of looking forward to with Bryce Benhart. The guy's 6'9", 315 pounds. He's massive. And you can see that pretty much on tape. Bryce Benhart, to me, is going to be one of those guys that's going to climb, right? Interestingly, I think it's Bledsoe that doesn't even have this guy ranked, or they didn't have him ranked in the preseason, which is kind of crazy because Bledsoe has everybody ranked. They have like 3,000 prospects. And Benhart was the guy they did not have ranked. And I was kind of surprised when I was searching that they didn't have him ranked. But the thing with this guy is he's 6'9". He is only 315 pounds, and I think he does have to get stronger. He does have to add weight. This guy's skinny, right? He's he has a good foundation. And I think if he puts, if he puts the effort into an NFL offseason, he adds weight, he eats right, a team really wants to build this guy up. Bryce Benhart, to me, has massive, massive, massive potential. Now, he does have to develop a little bit, but Bryce Benhart is a guy that could go in the first round this year. He might end up going in the lower half of the first round, right? I don't think he'll be the first or second tackle taken, but he's a guy that kind of reminds me of Patrick Paul in the sense that, Patrick Paul early on wasn't ranked very high. And even some people watch this tape and were like, this guy's not that good, right? I think with Bryce Benhart, some people might take that same approach, but the guy's quick for being 6'9". He has great footwork, but he does have to get stronger. He does have to add weight. And I think that's going to be the one thing teams will want to really figure out, right? How much weight can this guy actually realistically add? Colt Miller was the 15th overall pick years back. And Colt Miller was raw coming out, right? At UCLA, he was quick, he was long, he was lengthy, but he struggled with his power. And you knew that this guy had to add weight, and he came to the Raiders, and he's added weight. And he's been a really good tackle over the past 6-7 years. Bryce Benhart's going to kind of have to take that same approach. I'm not sure if the 6'9" is actually verified. I don't think it actually is. So he might not actually be 6'9". He might be like 6'7.5", 6'8". But he is tall. You can definitely see that on tape. Very long, very lengthy. You can see all that on tape as well. Great footwork. He's going to be a climber. So keep an eye on Bryce Benhart coming out of Nebraska. And then finally, this guy's kind of a unique football player as well. You got Ozzy Trapilo out of Boston College. He's almost 6'8", and that's 100% measured. This guy's an interesting player because he kind of reminds me of like Colton McKivitz of the 49ers. Before McKivitz, I forget the other guy they had as well. But Trapilo kind of reminds me of those guys, right? Out of Boston College. He's their starting right tackle. Very quick, very fast, really, really fluid mover. And for that size, I think there's a lot of potential there. Now, I don't know about his frame, and he definitely has short arms as well. Measure, I think it was officially measured for him as well. His arms are just a little bit longer than Will Campbell's, right? Now, some people might say, hey, 1.5 inches is a big difference. Maybe. I do think he has the potential to be a tackle in the NFL, but worst case scenario, this guy's going to be a really, really good guard at the next level. And I think Ozzy Trapilo out of Boston College is going to end up surprising a lot of people. I think he's probably going to be a top 96 pick, but he is getting top 64 hype right now, according to people that I've spoken to. I have a list of about 15 guys in total that are being ranked higher than what people kind of realize at this point, right? These guys are ranked by NFL teams specifically a lot higher. And these 3 guys are kind of on that list. I've also watched these guys. I have preseason grades on all 3 of these guys. Josh Conerly, Bryce Benhart were guys I was really, really high on before the season started. And just kind of watching their tape, I think it definitely backed it up. Ozzy Trapilo is another guy that I've watched in the past. Haven't watched his tape up until today. Watched his tape today. Very, very, very impressive. Trapilo hasn't played great competition. I think that's one thing that some teams might hold against him a little bit. But I do think he has potential and he has really good upside. And I do think that he could be a really good football player. Again, moves his feet really well. Very quick for that size. Makes good contact. Is able to latch to guys and stay in front of guys. Very, very smart. I think he's probably the smartest in terms of processing offensive tackle I've watched in this class. There's guys, like Minnesota's Ariante Ursery, who's already getting a lot of hype. The one thing with Ursery is he's tall, he's long, but he's also a little slower and he doesn't process great. Ozzy Trapilo processes a lot better, a lot faster, but he's not as strong, right? And I almost think that NFL teams value speed and quickness with guys that might not be as strong, right? They value that over guys that are very strong, but they don't move well, right? If you don't move well in the NFL, I feel like tackles just, you don't get valued very high. The one thing with Patrick Paul was he's tall, he's long. He didn't move really, 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 really well, but he moved good enough, and he was on the, frame-wise, he was on the smaller side, right? As opposed to a guy like DeJuan Jones, Trent Brown. These guys are a lot bigger in their frame, and I think Ursery kind of fits that same mold. I think Ursery is weighed in, I think, at like 331 pounds or something like that. So he's definitely on the bigger side. And I think he's like 6'6", right? I think his official numbers, he's in that 6'6" range. But I do like Ozzy. Right now, he's being ranked as the second tackle in this class, right? Assuming Will Campbell's not a tackle. And I'm not sure if that's going to actually hold true. I like these three guys. I want to know what you guys think, man. Have you guys actually watched any of their tapes? If you guys need tape, you guys hit me up. I'll be able to get that to you guys so you guys can watch some of these guys. Let me know what you guys think, man. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, consider subscribing. We are obviously covering tackles coming out this year. We're obviously covering, just generally speaking, O-line, D-line. Some of you guys know this, some of you don't know. I work as a scout for the Hula Bowl. I also work as a scout for the Baltimore Lightnings, which is a new team launching in a new league, right? So yeah, let me know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.